What's the worst first day you've had in a job? True story. I got mugged on my first night as a pizza delivery guy. It was my second delivery of the night. I parked the car and had to walk a little bit to get to the apartment building. During that walk, two guys came up, hit me in the head several times, shoved me down, and took the money bag and the pizza and ran. I went back to the pizza shop and quit on the spot. The pizza shop owner sent me to the emergency room to get checked out. They paid for the bill. They made sure I got home safe and sound. So they were great. Story 2. I was a supervisor in a technical support department for professional support, but was one day unceremoniously moved to personal support. The former was expensive, and for it, and experienced clients. The latter for regular home users. When I arrived in my new department, they were short 3 supervisors. So I was assigned all 3 teams, and the place was like Lord of the Flies. I was given a printout of schedules and names with no way to find the people. I started tracking them down to find that nearly 1/3 of them had left the company. But previous supervisors didn't notify H payroll. There were no files on what people were trained on, nothing. End of the day, my new boss asked how things were, and I told him people needed to be fired. He laughed and said, "We're understaffed already." I replied, "No, I mean the other supervisors who aren't doing any job I can identify, and you for letting it get like this." Things with him were a bit touchy after that. Story 3. My first job was at a new buffet in a small town when I was 14. They mass hired everyone that showed up to the interview. I was supposed to be a dishwasher, but when I got there for training, they handed me a ladder and told me to install the drywall ceiling tiles in the kitchen. I obviously had no idea what I was doing and had a tile fall on my back, which caused me to slip off the ladder and fall on the ground. The owner was upset that a 14-year-old kid couldn't do the non-dishwashing task correctly and chewed me out and sent me home and to never come back. I had to pester them for months to get my $6.50 for the hour I was there. Shockingly, they went under in just a few months. Story 4. Dairy Queen. The layout was such that I had to repeatedly walk past the grill where the floor was so covered in grease that it was like trying to walk across oiled ice. Super dangerous because if you slipped, you were likely to hit the grill. I got yelled at for mentioning that the floor needed to be clean. I even offered to do it but was told no. I was scheduled for an 8-hour shift, so by law, I got a 20-minute unpaid lunch break, which I was made to take about 45 minutes into my shift. I got yelled at for asking if I could please take my break closer to the middle of my shift. I was left alone as the only cashier and ice cream preparer, even though I hadn't even been told what everything on the menu was yet, let alone how to make it. I kept getting yelled at for not knowing when I went to the back, past the slip and slide of death, to ask for help. About 3 hours in, I was absolutely certain this would be a horrible place to work. So I told the owner that it was dangerous there. I was being yelled at by the manager for not knowing how to make things I'd never even heard of. And the job was a bad fit for me, so I was quitting and leaving. He told me it was unacceptable, that I wasn't giving 2 weeks' notice, and yelled at me about it until I cried. It's been over 20 years, and I've never set foot in a Dairy Queen again. Story 5. Not my first day, but my second. I had just hired on at a steel fabrication plant. My boss gave me a broom and told me to keep the sidewalks clean, keep my head up, watch what everyone is doing, and stay out of their ducking way. It's dangerous working with this heavy steel, and we don't want you to get hurt your first week out here. It was about 7 a.m. Around 8 a.m., a stack of steel fell over, trapping another employee, and I had to hear him scream bloody murder for about 3 HRs while they worked to get the steel beams off of him. He lived. I worked there for 2 years. He never was able to come back to work. Story 6. On my coworker's first day, we had a staff meeting, and the janitor of the building had found a puppy on the side of the road. She'd put it in a box in the meeting room until her shift was over, so she could take it home. Everyone was fawning over the puppy before the meeting, and then we started the meeting with the box in the middle of the table. About 3 minutes in, we heard the puppy give a rattle, and then it passed. Story 7. In the first few months of the pandemic, I got hired at a dog daycare, and the owner told me I'd be making $9 an hour as their receptionist. I go in to fill out the paperwork, and she tells me that she actually filled the receptionist position, but she has a dog handler position open for $8 an hour. I was hurting for money, so I accepted it. She told me I'd start right away, literally on the spot. She didn't tell me that before coming in, so I wasn't wearing proper clothes for it, capri pants, and she berated me for it and said, next time I do it, I'll get written up. As she was showing me around, I realized the entire play area for the dogs was inside. There were no outside areas for the dogs to run, and as a result, the whole place smelled like dog waste. She then threw me in a gated area alone with a pack of large dogs without any formal or informal training. One dog was pretty aggressive and kept trying to bite me. She'd yell at it from the other side of the gate, and all that would do was get the dogs riled up. I'm not scared of dogs, but I was scared that day. She yelled at me for not being assertive enough with the dogs, but I didn't know the dogs' personalities yet, and I didn't want to start a fight between them or get attacked. The dog that was trying to bite me kept picking fights with other dogs, and she got mad at me for telling the dog no. After my shift was over, I never went back. I had an interview at Target the next day and got hired there at $15 an hour. Story 8. Not first day exactly, but first day on my own delivering those big water jugs to workplaces. They put me on the route that supplies most downtown businesses, the hardest route. First day on my own, and downtown is big and busy. I didn't really know how to find most places. Units were in high-rises, and it's just not easy to find the right building. It was hard to find parking, etc. I was flustered. Finally found parking in some real narrow alleyway loading bay. I exit the truck to start loading up as many bottles as I can on our cart, but forgot the company name. I go to open the cab door back up to check my list, only to realize I locked the keys in the truck. Fast forward 3 hours later, after many calls and many angry delivery drivers who are upset I'm taking up the only bay, a locksmith guy shows up to jimmy the truck door. In line with my luck so far, the only tool this guy brings that will work is literally a coat hanger style device to attempt to physically pop up the door lock through the window, which I am prying open for so long I'm losing circulation to my fingers. After an hour and a half of trying, this guy miraculously gets it open. I thank him, load up the cart, and head up to the client's business. As I'm unloading the water jugs, a cute employee starts small talking me up, and as I'm dropping the water bottles off, I put one down too hard on the counter, and it smashes open, soaking her and myself. Many apologies are given. She didn't take it poorly at all, thankfully, but I felt awful. I finished my first delivery after 4 hours since starting my shift. Frustrated and mentally exhausted and sitting in completely soaked jeans, underwear, and most of the bottom half of my shirt, I start the truck and head to the next address. On my way, a red light hits, but these trucks are filled right up with water jugs, so it's a bit tricky to stop fast. I managed to stop, but I went over the white line a little and ended up on one of those X's that are meant to allow room for left-hand turns on tight cornered lights. I check my side mirrors. No dash-style rear-view mirror, it's a big solid truck. And there appears to be no one behind me, so I proceed to back up to clear the no zone. Crunch side. Well, some guy decided to stop right behind me in a car. So close, I couldn't even see him in the mirror. I even honked twice and slowly rolled back, but this guy must have been on his phone or doing whoever knows what, because he didn't back up, didn't honk to warn me, nothing. To make matters worse, he was not calm about me backing up into him at all. He screamed at me for the entire ordeal, non-stop, as if the sky was falling. He called my company instantly, and even before I could even get my boss on my phone, and made it seem like I was completely out of control and reckless. He just generally made a sort of bad situation an absolute nightmare. After I managed to leave the accident scene and all information was exchanged, I just drove back to HQ, dropped the truck off with most of the water not delivered, got in my car and went home, never came back. I felt bad for my boss. He was a nice guy, but that was just too much. I'm not even a labor type guy. My typical work is white-collar research and development for mechanical systems, but there was absolutely no work at the time, so I had taken whatever job I could. If I could say anything about the experience, it's that next time you see those water jug delivery guys bring water to your workplace, thank them. That job sucks. Story 9. This wasn't a bad first day, but sure was funny. New job site building a rest stop for Parks Canada. My boss and I are just surveying the site when he slips on a slope and slides down into a bog. He's down there on all fours, soaking wet and muddy, and I don't want to help in case I fall in too. Searching for something. To say, I muster out, did you mean to do that? He replies, of course. I didn't ducking mean to do that. God damn it. He crawls out, says, well, I've had enough for today. How about you? And I'm like, you sure we can call it a day? We drove 3 hours to have a look at the site for 10 minutes and 3 hours back home. The ride was pretty quiet when he says, did you ducking mean to do that? You ducking guy? We don't work together anymore. But he was an absolute gem of a guy. Still consider him a friend. Story 10. Wasn't my experience, but the experience of someone else I've heard. He went to work at an ice cream shop for his first job at 16. He was filling out the application when the manager told him to forget the application and go ahead and come behind the counter and start working. They had him start by making waffle cones, and he did that for 6 hours. Afterward, when they were sending him home for the day, they said, we'll call you. He wasn't actually hired. They had him work for 6 hours without pay and without hiring him. When he tried calling the next few days to see if he'd gotten the job or if they'd pay him for those 6 hours, they didn't answer. He decided to drive to the location a couple days later, and they were closed, permanent. They shut down literally the day after they had him work those 6 hours. They knew they were shutting down and didn't tell him. When he finally did get a hold of that manager and voiced his complaint about making him work without pay, she told him, well, you don't always get what you want. Story 11. When I was 18, I worked on a shipping dock, manning a forklift. We had these real slick electric units, built with great safety mechanisms, like dropping the emergency brake if there wasn't pressure on the seat. Well, after a year or two, I jumped to another shipping company for better pay and a reduced commute. I arrive on my first day and get a walkthrough of the company, run through my safety and compliance certification to operate their forklifts, and then it was showtime. This company didn't have those fancy new electric forklifts, though. They were propane. A major key difference is that you have a clutch pedal that you press when you need to manipulate the forks in any manner. This was a small learning curve to adjust to, but between that and the new roles, responsibilities, my mind was pretty wrapped up. So wrapped up that I didn't recognize that this forklift lacked all of those neat safety features I was used to. That emergency brake feature, it didn't exist on these. So it was up to me to employ best practices and set the damn thing myself. When a coworker instructed me to hop off my lift and examine an incoming shipment with him, I parked my lift in front of an open bay door, hopped off, and followed him inside the trailer adjacent to where I left my lift. A few moments into our discussion, we heard a massive bang. That seemed to have startled him more than any normal warehouse sound should. Perplexed, we exited the trailer with haste to figure out what the commotion was. As I exited the trailer, my eyes focused on the dock plate I had parked my lift on. Who's the jackass that took my lift somewhere? I thought to myself. I saw it. Very, very soon others did as well. Through the open bay door was my forklift resting on the counterweight perfectly. The forks were sticking straight up to the sky, and the entire unit fell right off the dock and into the parking lot. My face and ears grew hot, and my hearing became so fuzzy over the sheer embarrassment. I could barely hear my coworker screaming for someone to hop down and shut off the propane tank. Someone did. Because I didn't set the emergency brake, the unit managed to move, either from a slight decline in the dock plate or the minimal idle that can occur with propane forklifts. In mere moments, the doors to the front office blew open, and every white-collar employee rushed onto the scene with their mobile phones out, ready to capture the moment. I was instead gifted the presence of the owner CEO before me. At a near loss for words, I extended my hand to him and apologized. I figured this was a quick route to termination, and I couldn't wait to escape that building. He smiled and said to me, "Not an ideal first day, eh, Bronchman? Well, mistakes happen, and that's what insurance is for." He gave me the rest of the day off and told me to get a fresh start the next day while focusing on safety first. Good advice. The next day, and those that came after, were much better. I did earn the nickname Crash from just about everyone there, but it all could have gone much worse for me. Truly a humbling experience. Story 12. My meal was buying a restaurant and asked me to go work there for a day and take a look-see. She gives me the name. I look it up, then show up at 6 a.m. The ladies working seemed a bit confused, but they let me in and put me to work. 2 hours later, one of them comes to me and says, "We think you're supposed to be at the other Charlie Ann's." There were 2 unrelated restaurants 5 miles apart with the same name. Later, she tried to hire me. Story 13. I was 18 and had just graduated high school. My parents and my girlfriend's parents weren't shy about my slacker behavior and were fully expecting me to get a job. I tried dishwashing, telemarketing, etc. It all sucked and none of it lasted more than a month or so. My girlfriend's dad leaned on his best friend to give me an entry-level job. He owned a commercial landscaping company, as in design and installation of things like city parks, etc. So the guy is nice enough on the phone and tells me I'll start Monday and to arrive at this address at 5 a.m. Yeah, you can imagine how that went over with slacker me. So I show up and I'm dressed in a light insulated winter jacket, jeans, high-top tennis shoes, which were the most rugged footwear I owned. Well, Monday morning shows up and I'm get dropped off outside this chained/locked storage yard, and no one is around. It's completely dark. Great start. It only went downhill from there. It starts to rain. I'm not wearing a rain jacket, but it's pretty light to start, so not a big deal. Then no one shows up. Until 5:30 or so now I'm cold and a bit wet. A guy pulls up in an older pickup truck. He's pissed that I'm there. Evidently the owner, who was the friend of my GF's father and was such a nice guy on the phone, had dumped me as an inexperienced kid on one of his foremen. He hated that I had to be with him. He generally orders me around with grunts as we gather some equipment and stuff for the next hour in the rain. I'm now thoroughly soaked and almost shivering. The guy does not give a crap. He asked me at one point to drive the truck around to the other side of the storage yard. Guess what? It's a stick shift and I don't know how to drive it. Yep, if it's at all possible, he's now even more pissed, muttering under his breath, cussing as he throws stuff in the back of the truck while I stand nearby trying to help. Next, we drive 30 minutes to the job site, and the guy literally doesn't say one word, but instead drinks coffee and chain smokes the whole way. Okay, the job site is this open field that's been graded and marked off, but it is fresh dirt. The rain has turned very, very heavy in the last hour, so it's soaked and pooling in places. You guessed it. He orders me out of the truck to grab stuff, move stuff, etc., while he stays in the truck. More indignities follow until we knock off around 3 p.m. due to the early start. I am completely soaked to the skin and shivering. My legs up to my knees are caked with about 5 humps of mud on each leg. No exaggeration. When I got home, I called the dad's friend and thanked him for the opportunity, but that I wouldn't be returning. I told him to keep my pay for the day, and we'll just call it even. The GF's dad was pissed at me, that I had put his friend out because he extended the offer to me, etc. It's all good though. I learned a lot about how not to supervise people and how to be able to put myself in someone that has no idea what they're doing's shoes. I've managed people for over 30 years at this point, and that lesson has never left me. Story 14. I got hired at an insurance place. I was told business casual, so my first day I was wearing chinos and a sweater. I was still filling out paperwork when someone came in and told me I needed to go home and change. It was a half-hour's drive each way at the time, but I was broke, so I did it. Quit a few months later. Horrible place. Story 15. First day at work. A library. I'm 18 years old. I look like I'm My very first patron comes storming up and I ask, "Hi, how can I help?" And he starts cursing up a storm at me because his card had been deactivated a few days before. And I want to know why, and I want to know now. This is my first day here. Let me get someone for you. His whole attitude changed, and I guess he thought I was like a baby library page or something. It was a weird way to start a new job. Then I got chastised for not knowing what had happened last week at a job I didn't work at. Story 16. I started an internship at a minor league baseball team while I was in college, working for the in-house video production team. Final exams were the night before, so I got extremely drunk and woke up the next day in my apartment and noticed my car wasn't in the driveway. Fortunately, my roommate pulled in the driveway moments later, and I flagged him down and told him I needed to get a ride to my car because I had to be at my internship in 30 minutes. He, of course, asked, "Where's your car?" I didn't know, so we rode through some common apartment complexes where partying likely took place the night before and eventually found my car. At this point, I had about 15 minutes to make a 20-minute drive, so I broke most driving laws and barely made it to my first day of work on time. At this point, it started to sink in just how brutally hungover I was, and things were about to get much worse. I was assigned to the center field camera, which at the time was simply a wooden platform on a scaffolding directly in front of the giant metal scoreboard. There was no railing to speak of, but I could lean back on the scoreboard behind me, though there was about a 2-foot opening between the bottom of the scoreboard and the wooden plank floor of my camera stand. That opening would turn out to be problematic. Of course, it ended up being about 95 degrees that day in May, and I was told to wear a black shirt as my uniform, so on top of my dehydration, I was overheating in minutes and sweating profusely. By the third inning, I started feeling incredibly uncomfortable and a little lightheaded, but tried to tough it out. In the middle of the fourth inning, my body couldn't take it anymore, and I apparently passed out. I guess I collapsed backwards and slid down the scoreboard until I fell through that 2-foot opening and did a backsmacker on the ground 8 feet below. I regained consciousness moments later, I assume, to our technical director screaming at me, "What in the hell are you doing, camera 2?" I responded, slightly confused, "I think I fell." "You fell." Oddly, I largely felt okay. Being completely limp must have saved me. "I'm okay, I'll be back up in a second." "Don't move. We're sending somebody out there." A guy in the right field bleachers then yelled at me, "You okay, buddy?" I gave him a thumbs up and sat up and rested against the pylon at the bottom of the scoreboard, waiting for a fellow employee to come out and check on me. However, rather than an employee, they sent the stadium ambulance, which meant stopping the game, driving across the field with the lights on, opening the center field fence, and sending the paramedics out to give me a once-over in front of about 5,000 onlookers. I was ducking, mortified, but fortunately was able to come up with a good enough story that they figured I'd just locked my knees too long, or the heat, and the fact I hadn't eaten, both true, must have gotten to me. I earned the nickname The Fall Guy, and largely got to avoid that miserably hot camera the rest of the summer, but holy crap, what a terrible start to a job. Story 17. Decades ago, I rolled into California, penniless and in need. I applied many places, including the local McDonald's, as I needed money immediately. While at the interview, the manager said they didn't hire guys with long hair. Being a guy with long hair, I told him I understood his position, thanked him for his time, and excused myself so he could get back to it. About a week later, I get a call from him telling me they'd looked past it and would like to hire me. Great, I get to eat again. Trouble is, I didn't have any razors. All I had was a clipper that gets pretty close, slightly more than stubble, but definitely not beard hair. I show up and the owner is there. I have met some S in my life, but this guy deserves whatever stroke he gets. He sees me coming up from the underground freezer. Some McDonald's keep them underground. It's a goddamn liability, but what you gonna do? And just lights me the duck up about everything. He's literally screaming at me on my first day about very light face fuzz, saying that I asked them to make an exception for my long hair, and now this. I asked for no exceptions. I excused myself. They called me. I try to explain my circumstances to him, that I literally have nothing in the world, and in front of everyone, he shoves a $20 bill at me and tells me to go next door and get a razor. The manager, meanwhile, who previously had been personable and nice, was suddenly taking this fatherly tone with me, saying things like, "Look, I can't hold your hand. You have to do the hard work." I did. Banana. For work in that store, from that day on. He ran that place like ducking Auschwitz. He would yell at the elderly cashiers up front, in front of customers. He never mailed me my taxes. "Well, if you send me the money, I'll send you the forms." So I sicked the IRS on him. I hope they buried his ass. Probably not, but I'll take any catharsis I can. 20 ducking years later, and I still hate that piece of crap. Story 18. Dishwasher at a small breakfast place when I was 14. Didn't tell me I had to supply my own gloves, and the dishwasher was right at the egress of the breakfast bar, so I had to constantly keep hopping out of the way of the waitstaff as they came back to grab plates. No sink, just a soapy bucket of water, and an industrial dishwasher that was more akin to an autoclave than your regular dishwasher. Each time I opened it, steam would come pouring out. I was sweating my ass off. I burned my hands so bad the first time I grabbed a plate out of there. And the special for my first day was beer-battered shrimp. They were floating around in the bucket and sticking to my arm. Story 19. Got hired on as a prep cook at a Longhorn Steakhouse as a second job to make some money before I moved. Started in December. During orientation, the general manager said, "If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, you don't deserve a job." Fair enough, I usually arrive at least 15 minutes early to anything, work included. My first actual day of work, I get dropped off at 7:45 for an 8 a.m. shift. It's like 30 degrees out, starting to snow. 8 rolls around and nobody else shows up. 8:10, nobody. Finally, 8:20 rolls around and the other 2 prep cooks show up. I asked them what the deal was and they said the GM was always late. Then at 8:30, the GM finally shows up to unlock the doors to let us in. I looked at him and said, "If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late," and just gave him this look. He told me it wasn't going to work out. So I walked 2 miles home in the snow. Was probably a good thing, honestly. Story 20. None of mine were particularly bad, except the normal, "I don't know what I'm doing or who any of these people are" type things. Instead, I'll give one for my wife. My wife, girlfriend at the time, and I used to live in a small house in a small town, and while we were out there, she worked at this grocery store chain in our state, and I think a couple others. She worked in the deli there, but it was such a small store, they didn't really have much to it. It was actually more of deli bakery that they just combined. Years went by and we decided to move back closer to the bigger city, and she was able to transfer to a store close to where we were moving. They had told the new store that she has had years of deli experience, but what they didn't seem to discuss was the fact that the old store's deli didn't have half of the stuff a regular big store had. My wife showed up for her first day and saw that their deli had a full lunch meat counter with the slicers and scales, which her old store did not have. She had absolutely no experience with slicing lunch meat and actually barely dealt with customers at the old store at all. She told them this numerous times when she got there, but they didn't listen. They basically just threw her on the counter and told her to start calling numbers. She tried her best, but of course the other workers started getting frustrated when she asked constant questions, still not listening to the fact that she didn't have any experience in this area. All they heard is that she had years of deli experience. That was her first and only day at that store. She was able to close the store well enough because she had experience cleaning up and mopping and such. But after that, she didn't dare put herself through that again, and I don't blame her. It was a big struggle for her to find another job because back then no one was hiring, but we did what we had to do. I understand the miscommunication in the transfer, but I don't understand why they couldn't have listened to her when she said they didn't have the deli counter at her old store. The company wasn't really great about that kind of stuff, though. I actually worked for the same company, but a different store. And I wasn't exactly happy there either. Story 21. I did an internship at a geotechnical engineering firm one summer, and after my initial orientation, they had me drive out to meet someone on a coring job. It was way out in the sticks on a hot day, maybe 101 or higher. The place was out in the mountains on a massive piece of private property, like over 10K acres. It was a collection of wineries. We do the job, and they wanted me to leave early to avoid overtime on my first day, so they told me to drive home on my own and gave me some very basic directions on how to get out of this maze of mountains. The only real direction I was given was, when you get to Y intersection, go down, not up. I leave, get to a Y intersection, and go down. I guess it was a different Y intersection. I realized pretty quickly I went the wrong way, but couldn't turn around because I was on a tight, unpaved mountain road that was too narrow to turn around. I drive a few miles, try to turn around in a larger spot and get the truck stuck. No one knew where I was, and I had no cell service and no water, and it was probably 5+ miles back to the job site. I started walking because I thought I heard a road, and sure enough, there was a rarely used public road not far from me. Eventually, I sat on a log and considered the real possibility I might not make it back. I was starting to get disorientated due to exhaustion and dehydration. I collapsed on the side of the road eventually until someone drove down the road and saw me. They picked me up and dropped me off in the nearest gas station where I got some water and called my boss. The next day I had to go with a bunch of trucks to get my truck back. They didn't fire me either. Story 22, it wasn't her first day at the job, it was her first day covering my office. I told her whatever she does, do not pull the panic button, unless it's a reason to panic. Of course, she randomly decides to pull it in the middle of the day. Doesn't answer when the company calls for the code, so of course it prompts the police to show up. It's a psychiatrist office, so many of the patients have issues with police, for various reasons causing patients to get upset and panic, doctors to get mad, and the police to be annoyed because they are questioning her and she's acting stupid. When I got back to work, they told me that she thought I said pull the button to make the computer work better. The button is not connected to or near the computer whatsoever. Story 23. Back when I was in college, I started working at a certain sort of call center. My first day was emotional hell, and not just for me. See, this wasn't a sales gig in the traditional sense. I had been hired to be a talent scout for an incredibly shady organization that was trying to hoodwink unsuspecting parents into purchasing acting and modeling lessons for their kids. My job involved calling people, enthusiastically reciting a script, then booking marks into one of our last remaining slots. The children and their parents would arrive on a weekend, go through a fake audition, complete with fake casting agents, and then be instructed to call a given number on Monday morning. That number would connect people right back to the call center. Hopeful applicants be told that the casting agent had loved the child's audition, but that said child needed some additional training before they were ready for the screen. Parents would then be suckered into paying thousands of dollars for 12 days worth of completely worthless classes, and if a kid missed even one session, they would be summarily expelled, lest their guardians paid even more money to reinstate them. Anyway, I started working on a Wednesday. By that evening, I was feeling physically sick and I was kept awake by guilt-ridden nightmares. I struggled through Thursday, then quit on Friday morning. Had I stayed any longer, I'm sure that my soul would have withered and died. Story 24. I've got two, but both jobs ended up being great, and I worked there for a year plus one. I worked at a flower shop in high school. The gal training. Me and I found this pink plastic gun thing. Obvi, not a real gun, but we barely touched the trigger, and all of a sudden we were coughing and our eyes were watering. We had to leave the room and close up the shop early. It was some kind of pepper or bear spray. 2. Job in college was a group home for elderly women with mental disabilities. Since I was new, I didn't know how to de-escalate situations yet. One woman had the mental capacity equivalent to a 3-year-old, and tantrums were common. She had a tantrum my first day, and not knowing how to deal, I made it worse. Went outside to chill out, and when I felt better to come back in, the lady saw and ran to the door to hit me and keep me out. No one else was around. I went to the other door to get in. Avi, I'm alive, but damn, that was a night. Story 25. I had community service at a library once. I had to call people about books they wanted to order that have come in. The very first call I made, the woman who ordered the book was in tears. Someone close to her died. They had given me a script to work with, but nothing on the script said anything about death, so now I'm just trying to make them feel better. Anything they ask, I'm just saying, yes, of course we can do that. Then it comes out that this is my first day. She says, okay, can I talk to someone in charge to confirm you can do everything you said you could? I wasn't in the room for the confirmation, but holy crap, I wasn't ready. Story 26, oh man, Virgin Megastore, when those were still a thing. I applied not really expecting a call because it was a giant mall store, and that's just kind of how it went. Manager calls me a week after I applied, asked me to come into an interview. I told him I was sick as a dog. I had the flu, chills, puking, aches, the whole 9 yards. He was enthusiastic and asked me to come in anyway. I needed the money badly, and the mall was only down the street. He insisted I come in. Whatever, if we can make it quick. I go in for the interview. It's a group interview. He failed to mention this. I'm doing my best to keep my distance from everyone while he asked the standard mall employer corporate questions. Why do you want to work here? How passionate about music media are you? What does Virgin Megastore mean to you? Why do you want to join our family? Me. Ugh, man, either give me the job or don't, but I need to go rest. Manager, nah, come on. We're going to do a floor tour. Me. I don't have that in me. I need to go. Manager. Well, if you stay and last a whole shift, you're hired. Come on, let's hit the floor. Me. Vomits manager. Me. I'm going home. They never called me again, but I was paid for the interview. All 40 mins of it. Story 27. I worked in a Kmart, and the first day I saw a bulletin regarding a secret shopper who approached an associate's stocking shelves and asked for assistance. He told her to duck off. Yeah, I realized that morale at that store was non-existent. Story 28. I was being trained on how to clean cages for PetSmart before the store opens. First day. Manager hands me one of the Russian dwarf hamsters to hold. Hamster jumped out of my hand and hit the floor. Her eye hit. I was crying and saying sorry over and over, and the manager laughed at me and said, "Don't worry, it's just a hamster." Story 29. I unknowingly took a dump next to my boss. We both had pretty nasty craps, and when we got out of the stalls, things were awkward for a bit. We now laugh about it every now and then. Story 30. First corporate job. We had these large metal coffee urns in the break room on the floor. You put the grounds in the cup thing and hit a button because they were piped into the water line. What I did not know was that it would run a cycle for each button push. I pushed it twice in a row and left for it to brew. When I came back, it had doubled up and overflowed, and there was coffee everywhere. Day 1, Story 31. Couple of months ago, a local business was looking for someone to do laser engraving. Just needed digital art experience. Husband and I decided I'd apply, and they told me part-time was fine. My kids are in school, and it was right down the road, so it was going to work perfectly. Talked to the owner, again part-time, and was even told I could just come in when they had orders. Even better, didn't discuss pay as I was more interested in the experience and the hours. Something to get me out of the house and to learn the laser engraver. Owner tells me to come the next day to kind of look it over and get more info. I go the next day and turns out it was my first day. Also turns out he wanted full-time and was very upset I wasn't willing to work 18-hour days and willing to put in a ton of overtime. Apparently I'm what's wrong with today's youth because I told him we weren't the right fit, that I didn't have to work, so I was looking for something to work for my hours. He was expecting someone needy. Most people here are, but very few could go straight into doing that job. Obvi, I am super lazy for not wanting to take work home with me and make my life center around that job. He got even angrier when he found out my degree, experience, and the fact I'm not a lazy youth. He even told me after I mentioned I was looking for something to fit in during my kids' school days that his kids were angry he worked their entire childhood, but as adults, they understood. Sure, but I have the choice to not do that. I already work some on the weekends and they get sad about it. So yeah, first and last day, because he lied his butt off thinking I wouldn't stand up for myself. Story 32. Working at a recycling plant as a line picker. 10-hour shift. Whole place smells like vomit and rotting milk. As a line picker, your job is to grab items coming by that aren't supposed to be on that part of the track. I got placed on plastics, so I was grabbing milk cartons and clamshell packaging. Didn't help the smell at all. The worst part though was the motion sickness. I've got eye issues and I'm pretty susceptible to Ms. because the line was moving a lot faster than the stagnant machinery. After a few minutes, my head started to throb. I hadn't thought about this being an issue as it hadn't cropped up when they were testing me. After an hour, I've got a fairly decent headache. Nothing extreme, but manageable. By hour 4, I'm in agony as my head throbs and I can barely focus. Lunch happens and I rest for a bit, but I don't touch any food. Lunch is over, back on the line for another 4.5 hours. By hour 6, I can't form a coherent thought. I'm running purely on instinct and backup power. I still have a very strong memory of standing on the line, trying to literally just think something, and my thoughts getting stuck on, like a record player with the needle stuck, ducking scary stuff. So I wrapped the day and never went back. Called them the next morning and lied, saying that my preferred job contacted me and I wouldn't be returning. They were totally cool with it, as I'm guessing their turnover was super high because, spoiler alert, the job sucks ass. Luckily, my preferred job did end up calling me the next day, so it all panned out. Story 33. I've somehow been lucky with mine. The most notable was starting at a concrete factory, though it barely rates the term, and another new guy, Andy, hit his ducking finger bad while we were throwing scrap metal in a dumpster, like it's an avulsion, hanging skin flap. He's spurting blood, so I tell him to go get bandaged up. I quickly finish my task and I notice a significant blood trail leading into the factory all the way to medicine cabinet. It felt like I was tracking Predator with how noticeable the trail was. Andy is standing in a pool of blood trying to wrap his finger in paper towels, which was as effective as hiding from a nuclear bomb, under a desk, and none of the other guys, foreman included, are doing crap or even remotely concerned. I had some EMT training, so I decided to step in and help since everyone else was useless. Pressure on the wound was ineffective due to sheer blood flow, and the blood was seeping through the tape he had tried wrapping it in. Bleeding being as bad as it was, I decided to tourniquet his finger with some gauze. Andy thought it was too tight and wanted me to place the tourniquet directly over the wound, which you aren't supposed to do, and would try to loosen it. I had to constantly and calmly explain what the tourniquet was doing and why it had to be so tight. The bleeding slowed immensely, so I was able to bandage the avulsion and slowly, over time, loosen the tourniquet. He finally stopped bleeding somewhere around 45 minutes later. No one has asked if he's okay or what I'm doing either, And Andy was able to take it easy the rest of the day and got stitches later. Story 34, first day working as a chemist in a quality control lab. The person training me told me, just so you know, every single person in this department has had to go on medical leave for a stress-related illness between their first and second year on the job. That definitely happened to me. From there, it only went downhill. I toured the warehouse, and there were pallets of raw materials stacked so high and improperly, they were leaning toward the walkway. There was a struggling rat on a glue trap, and the warehouse guy said, "At least it isn't squeaking anymore." Their walk in cold storage had liquid leaking out the door. I went to lunch, and it was like a scene out of Mean Girls. I was told I couldn't sit at certain tables and wound up eating by myself. Someone stole the cupcakes out of my lunch bag too. I realized I made a horrible mistake, but I really needed the job and the money, plus the market was bad, so I stuck it out for 19 months. The place is currently in the process of shutting down and will be closed by the end of the year. So they eventually got what was coming to them. Story 35. Oh, where do I begin? A little over 2 years ago, I took a job at a convenience store that my best friend also worked in. I had the opening shifts, which required me to basically open and run the whole store by myself. 5'3", 19-year-old. My first day there, I started at 7 a.m. and had some sort of addict walk through the front door, already tweaking, and asked for some lotto tickets and a piece of paper. He gave the paper back to the owner, who stayed with me the first day and walked out to smoke something. The owner handed me the paper, and it had his name and number in some creepy serial killer handwriting, and I immediately tossed it in the trash. As the day goes on, I get more and more flustered, because not all of the stuff there had prices on it. If it wasn't sold often, it wasn't in the system, yay me. So I have to call them all the time to ask about prices, because the owner left me alone for some reason. And there's a long line of people, so I'm just getting overly anxious about everything. I also had to restock the sodas and water in the cooler, and even sometimes the beer, which I had to make sure the store was empty first, because I'm the only one there, and refill the coffee as well as manage lotto tickets. Oh, did I mention we sold crack pipes too? Story 36. I was volunteered by my mom to work at an elementary school to help organize and move furniture and material before the start of the school year. I guess they had cleaned, renovated, and everything in the building was all put into the big gymnasium. I was like 13 and was told I was being paid. I got into the gymnasium expecting desks to be in one corner, chairs in another, etc. Crap. I walked in and it was like walking into the room of requirements from Harry Potter, the one that has the diadem hidden in it. You would have thought that they were piling crap up to burn it in a massive bonfire. And it wasn't just desks and chairs. Random textbooks were thrown into this massive teetering pile. They then told me they wanted me to organize the items first. The only problem is that there was no room to even start. You know, when there's just so much crap that there isn't even room to start a new pile of something? It turned it at me, just grabbing chairs and putting them on one part of the crap pile, desks on another part of the crap pile, etc. And even then, I never got to the center of the insanity that was the crap pile Tootsie Pop. Oh, and I was alone, a single 13-year-old, and not even a strong one, trying to do what would take a team of grown men with equipment like dollies a full month to move. I honestly don't know how I didn't get injured, because nothing was stacked, just tossed haphazardly into a 20-foot pile. I was never given a single penny for the 2 weeks I was there. I'm beginning to suspect my mom lied about the pay and just wanted me to stop playing EverQuest. Story 37. In a care home for elderly people, just finished national service and needed a job until starting at college. No skills required. Turned up for an evening shift and was told what to do. One of the people living there was the same age as my mom, 50-ish, and looked rather like my mom. She had pretty advanced MS and needed help with everything. On her table was a picture of her kids, who never came and visited her. They were my age. The kicker. She loved it when one of the helpers had time to smoke a cigarette with her and watch TV, so I did that and was told by the other helper she was very happy. Her missus was not affecting her mentally, so she was just sitting there, bored out of her mind, hoping for someone to help her smoke a cigarette and laugh about some stupid TV show. I noped the duck out of that job and kind of regret it now. Extra kicker for laughs. I got Mrs. Six years later. Story 38. I was working in a hog slaughterhouse when I was 18 years old. Cleanup duty was the job I was given, so it was my duty to dump all the scrap bins from each workstation. All these scraps ended up in a big pit with an auger at the bottom to grind and into a slop and send off to a rendering plant, which turned this product into even more unspeakable things: pet food, animal feed, etc. I was the last to go for lunch since I was to clean dump scraps from each station before heading off. Last thing to dump was a massive wheelbarrow, about 5 times the size of a regular yard work wheelbarrow, full of pigs. There was a drain hole in the floor. Me rushing to dump hits the drain, and about 60 pigs fly all on the floor. So I spent my lunch collecting the pigs back into the barrow. Needless to say, I went for a bathroom break, got changed, cleaned up, and ducked off out of there. Keep my pay, I said. Ha! Story 39. First day was a dream, mostly paperwork and PC setup, but the rest of that week made up for it. It was my first professional office job out of college, and I was so nervous about proving myself. Instead, I proved that I was an airhead. On the second day, my bus stop was closed for construction. I saw it from afar and begged the driver to pull over anywhere nearby, even blocks away. He refused, and the bus blew right on past and proceeded to get on the highway. After a while, I got off at the next stop pretty far away and had no clue where I was. Over an hour later, I found my way back to the office. It was then that I realized in my panic I had left a very important notebook on the bus with information I needed to get my work done. So I was late and had to have my task re-explained. The third day, I backhanded my coffee mug all over the brand new keyboard, mouse, paperwork, everything. The fourth day, I brought my massive mug from home that is impossible to tip. But as I lifted it out of the microwave to make tea, it caught on the lip of the microwave tray that I couldn't see because it was above my head. A couple spoonfuls of boiling water spilled out and would have hit my new coworker who was next to me if he hadn't jumped back in time. But the water did manage to get on the industrial coffee maker that was under the microwave. And of course, some slipped inside the on switch and short-circuited something, depriving the entire office of coffee before even 8 a.m. I don't remember the fifth day. I just wanted to be invisible. Story 40. My first day at Menards, a home improvement store. Typically in the Midwest, they give you this little introduction. I was 5 months pregnant and was having really severe nausea and pain, and was just trying to get through the first day the best I could. They spoke about how their turnover rate was over 5% and it was a goal to get it down. My second day, I told them I had a doctor's appointment well before, and when I told them I needed to leave for the appointment, they told me I would be written up for leaving early. I told them to go ahead. It was an appointment for my baby, and I wasn't going to miss it. My third day, I showed up and they told me that since I missed 2 hours of a shift, they had to suspend me. I told them to eat a banana, handed them my badge and apron, and left, never ducking work at Menards. Story 41. Worked at a grocery store, specifically in the deli fresh foods depth. Showed up at the wrong store. They didn't specify which location, so I went to the training store. After I figure out that I'm in the wrong place, I go to my correct store. They even called to tell my store that I'd be late due to their own fault. I get to my location and the boss is a duckin' craphead. Rude, argumentative, and regarding me like I showed up late on purpose. Not as if I'd been given wrong instructions. She treated me like a little kid trying to shirk work when I was in my 30s and hired on a full-time and needed the job badly. Boss never quit riding my ass, only gave me 1 day off a week because I was so good with the customers. But she never really complimented me or gave me a raise. So many people hated her, and I saw a customer give her a serious tongue lashing one day. I quit less than a year in, and the store manager quit the next damn month. Last time I saw my old Soupy, she was behind the deli at a diff location. She's so bad they keep shifting her around the state until retirement. Duck her. She's a Story 42. I worked at a Ryan's Steakhouse for a few days in my early 20s. There was this smoking hot girl from the Czech Republic that worked there, and her accent was exotic and really cute. I happened to notice that all of the guys there kind of buzzed around her all day. I washed some dishes, took out some orders, cleaned up the food bar and all that for the first day. So this Czech girl comes over to me and is like, "You don't talk much. You won't last here if you're not social, FYI. I said, "Unless being social gets me a raise, I'm good." She went off and started screaming at me in whatever language folks from the Czech Republic speak in. The manager comes over and is like, "What's the problem?" And I'm like, "No idea. She's psycho." The manager was like, "We'll talk tomorrow." He ended up not coming in the next day because I forgot why. I showed up, did my work, went home with no problems. I came in on day 3, worked the majority of the day, and like an hour before I would have gotten off, he brought me in his office and fired me for harassing the Czech girl. She said she didn't feel comfortable working with me because I didn't talk, so I must be a psychopath who was gonna shoot up the place. Come to find out, she was giving him head after work each night. I wasn't mad at him. Ryan's was a crap job anyway. Story 43. My first day as a medic was terrible. We got a call from a babysitter. She turned her back for what she said was a minute, and the little guy she was watching fell into the pool. We got there and she was doing CPR. We took over, and I don't know how, but we got that little guy to start breathing again. We got him ready to transport to the hospital, and my partner decided I should get some experience, so he left me in the back of the ambulance with the kid. Everything was going well until it wasn't. We chatted a bit and things seemed okay. Then he looked at me, said my name, and just flatlined. I did everything I could. Crap still hurts today when I think about it. Messed me up for a good while. Got all of August off and got set up with a therapist. Being a medic can either be the greatest job in the world or the absolute worst. I wish I was still a medic sometimes. Story 44. I picked up a second job once at a local Pizza Hut as a delivery driver. Originally, I was working at a store on the other side of the county, but they were under construction when I started, so I go to train in a store on a very sketchy part of town. I came in straight from my first job, which is an office job, so I have my dress pants and shirt on. Mind you, they said a uniform would be waiting on me. Well, there was no uniform. Kind of upsetting, but whatever. So the manager just puts me on the phone to take orders and never showed me anything about the ducking register. So of course I have to ask lots of questions, as I have no idea where anything is on this menu or anything, because it's my first day. She seemed extremely annoyed at me for not knowing. Then they put me with the cook, and at least he is showing me what to do. My dress clothes get ruined with all the grease and crap. Still haven't been on a delivery yet. I was supposed to be a driver, which I understand during downtime that I could help in those areas. Finally, I go on a delivery with one of the drivers, and they tell me lots of horror stories about the job and that people in the area, terrible tippers. Anyways, that was my one and only day working there. Story 45. Bought new shoes for my first workday. Hurt like hell the whole day. In the evening, I finally got out of them. All toes were bleeding, and the nails from the big toes were completely blue. Took 2 years for the nail to grow it all out. Story 46. Was employed at a smelter where manganese was produced. My task was to open the kiln with a large drilling rig so that the liquid metal settled nicely into the gutter and further down into large vessels. The magnesium inside the oven keeps 1200 degrees Celsius. The first time I had to drill the hole in the stove alone, I noticed that it was difficult to get through with a drill. When I finally got a hole in the oven, I saw the jet of manganese in a violent pressure. The only problem was the jet stood out to the left and not down into the gutter it was supposed to. This was something I had not received info about that could happen, so I had no idea what to do. It all ended with me pouring 24 tons of liquid manganese on the floor where I sat and down on the floor below me. Lamps, shovels, and tools melted, and I was left speechless to look at. This was the last tap of the stove on my shift, and the night shift that went on had to use an excavator to get rid of everything when it had solidified. Worst day I've ever had at work. Story 47. Last year, COVID came for my comfy remote job I'd had for 4 years, but I was lucky to find something else that was a good fit in my field, though I was going from doing what I do in higher education to doing it in manufacturing, food manufacturing. For context, I work in a specialty area in human resources. My boss had a major hard-on for making training 2 weeks long, with virtually all of that time spent on the production floor, observing what different roles do. Despite most of them being relatively straightforward and incredibly repetitive, all right, cool, whatever. So my first day, I spent the first 6 hours of the day in a 100-degree industrial kitchen, having no break whatsoever, just standing there, totally useless and in the way. Watching a pair of guys who didn't speak any English working a kettle, making 3 back-to-back batches of chili. Shortly before I was due to go back to the office for an entire afternoon of meetings, he was also big into meetings. The kettle assistant lost his grip on the tote of product he was handling on the platform a few feet above me and dumped like 5 pounds of raw ground beef all over me. Story 48. I showed up and found out that salary meant hourly with an unpaid lunch. I'm a licensed professional who does not work to a clock. That unpaid lunch meant that wanted me to actually work 4 11-hour shifts a week with alternating weekends, which I told them from the get-go I couldn't and wouldn't be doing. I was shadowing a manager of my department. I ended up bored and teaching one of their longer-lasting employees how to use their carrier system. I caught one of their salespeople committing an actual financial regulatory crime. Then I had to educate that manager on one of the basic principles of our industry, insurance. She didn't believe me and bet me $1 I was wrong. We went to the head of that division, and his reply to which one of us was right was, "Dude, you can't duck and do that." He's right, please tell me you haven't been doing that. Needless to say, that was my first and last day. They wanted to pay me $35K a year to do a $50K plus commission job where my boss was less experienced and knowledgeable than me, and my coworkers still needed compliance and systems training in an industry where non-compliance means losing licenses and getting fined. Story 49. Long time ago when I was working in hospitality, on my first day, trial, I had an order for a tea. I managed to take the wrong coaster and didn't notice. The tables were pretty low to the ground, and as I was going down to the table, I managed to spill the boiling water all over myself and the customer. It didn't help that the woman was a regular customer coming in every day, but somehow I got the job. Story 50. One summer, I took a 1-day job on my grandfather's farm, baling hay. If you've never done that, it's like this. There is a tractor that's pulling a baler with a flatbed wagon attached to the back of the baler. You stand on the moving wagon in the hot sun while the baler pitches bales of hay, which weigh about 60 pounds, toward you. You catch them and stack them on the wagon, moving up on top of the bales on, remember, a moving wagon, as you stack them. You do that from dawn to dusk, taking breaks for water when the wagon gets full, and they go to get another one from the side of the field. Hay gets everywhere, and it itches like hell. 4 weeks later, when your sunburn finally fades and you manage to wash the last of the hay out of your hair, you wonder what the duck you were thinking when you agreed to do that job for $50. In the 1970s, $50 was a lot more than it is now, but still. Story 51. I worked as a receptionist at a long-term care facility for seniors with dementia. I was there for about a year, just left this September. On my literal first day, I had a phone call with a man who screamed at me for letting his mother die alone. This was, of course, during COVID, so visitation for each resident that was limited to a single person chosen by the resident's power of attorney. In this case, it was the man's brother. The two of them didn't get along, and somehow that was my fault. I got to listen to him yell for 5 minutes without getting a word in edgewise, until he put his son on the phone to continue the scream fest. Meanwhile, a resident ran into reception, totally naked, and started banging on the glass entrance doors, trying to escape. Don't ask where the nurses and care aides were, because I don't ducking know. So I ended up hanging up on this incredibly angry man so I could summon help. He called back later and was predictably unhappy. My manager was absolutely mortified and promised me nothing like that had ever happened before. And to be fair, nothing that wild ever happened again during my tenure there. Story 52. Not my first day with the company, but it was my first day at the location. I was an event security guard while in college at Ohio State. I worked at concerts and hockey games and things around Columbus, and one evening they asked me to work at a soccer game. I was at a gate that opened up to let food trucks onto a plaza, and we opened it to let people in when it was closer to kickoff. Some drunk fans coming in said, "Hey, look, the scoreboard is on fire," and I thought they were just messing with me, but I was wrong. After a few groups of people kept saying the same thing, I looked over and saw a plume of black smoke. I ran to the chair where I had set down my radio and heard the big boss very angrily asking if I would clear people away from the gate and let fire trucks in, which I did. The fire was small and the game was only delayed about 45 minutes. But one thing I wish they would have done was tell me that they were still going to shoot off fireworks from the top of the stadium at kickoff. Story 53. Was very sick, high fever and congestion before my first day. A day before I wrote to HR asking to postpone my start date by 2 days. They said no. So I came very sick to work, shook everyone's hands while warning them I'm sick. I don't remember much from that day, just that it was very, very unpleasant. Not sure why HR would say no to such a request. I think they were afraid I'd be interviewing for another company, which I could still do. Anyway, it sucks to start a job, which is already a stressful thing, when you are also very sick, not to mention there's the risk of spreading whatever I had to the rest of the company. I literally met everyone on that day. Story 54. First fast food job I ever had. I walk in my local KFC on my first day. It was on Super Bowl day. The shift change later that day would end up having to be done through the back door. The place got so packed, you couldn't see the dining room through the sea of people. I looked at that crowd and started taking orders at the cashier station with the full knowledge that I didn't even know the difference between a chicken thigh or breast. I spent the next 6 hours asking questions and constantly getting in the way of the only 3 people that actually knew what they were doing. On a day, they barely had a fighting chance of dealing with the hungry and impatient mob. As they ran around constantly yelling to the cooks in the back for more and more food to be made, they had to keep checking and correcting the orders I cobbled together. I worked there for another 9 months and never had a single shift ever approach the order of magnitude of customers of that first day. Story 55. I had just started to receive medical treatment through the VA when I was offered a position entering and verifying insurance claims for a local WorkMed office. I'd been waiting a while for the VA stuff, and my first appointment for mental health was the day before my first day of work, and they prescribed me some anti-anxiety meds to hopefully help deal with some of the work stuff and being around people. I ended up having a very strong reaction to the medication and almost passing out multiple times. I explained the situation and they were understanding and told me to return the next day and see how it goes. Day 2, halfway through shift, I began to experience my first kidney stone, although I didn't know what it was at the time. They told me it wasn't going to work out as someone picked me up to take me to the emergency room as I was in no shape to drive. Story 56. I'd worked at this restaurant for about 8 and 9 months in the kitchen, had just finished training to be moved to the front of house. On my very first day taking orders on my own, a guy sneaks in the back door and OD'd in our bathroom. We only knew this because his lookout buddy basically told us he'd been in there too long, and my manager recognized him enough to know exactly what was going down. He had locked himself in, and at the time we didn't have a key to the bathroom. That changed later that week. So my manager unscrewed the door hinges, but they were glued in. Eventually, he took a hammer and screwdriver to the lock on the door and knocked it out, and dude is just face down on the tiles with his heroin kit on the baby changing station next to him. Had to have been like that 15-20 minutes by this point. Manager slapped him awake and His buddy managed to carry him out of the restaurant before the cops showed up. Story 57, I had a seizure. I was about 5 months pregnant in the middle of a hot summer and just started at a fast food restaurant about a mile away. I didn't drive at the time, so I walked there. As I was standing near the manager's office, talking with my new GM, I started to get dizzy and hear a ringing noise. I passed out as far as I knew, but the GM stated I was shaking badly, and I sure had peed my pants. I was checked out by EMS and told to follow up with my doctor since I refused the ambulance ride to the hospital. The district manager happened to be there, not too common, and he drove me back home in my pee pants. Story 58. I was hired as a party host for a children's playland. I was the only adult who was allowed in the playground area, so half of it was coaxing children out when their time was up. The slide was wet, and the lower half of the ball pit was socks and diapers. We had staff meals from the on-site cafe, and mid-afternoon we realized everyone had food poisoning when the character in the large, fluffy suit vomited in the head of the costume, and I had to guide them out with vomit pouring out of the mesh hole. I stayed another week after that, and the next person in the character suit vomited because of the smell already in the head. They then chemically cleaned the head, and the next person to wear it vomited, then passed out from the fumes, and I had to drag an unconscious 6-foot rodent from a room of screaming and crying kids. Story 59. Started my first day in a major broadcaster as an IT technician. Given a domain all-access admin amount and nothing to do yet, so I started looking around through the file servers, etc. Clicked on the top level of the user share, and the PC froze. I waited a few minutes, still frozen. I'm wondering if I should reboot my PC when I suddenly notice all the people frantically running around and the phone going bonkers because nobody can log in or access their files. Finally, the PC unfreezes. Turns out when I clicked on it, my mouse was still moving. So I have drag moved the entire user's folder up a level, breaking the share. I debate admitting what I've done, but instead just quietly drag it back to the right place and sit there, wetting myself as the PC locks up again for another 10 minutes, after which everything starts working again. They never worked it out. Story 60, got a job at Walmart, and on the first day, the manager told me to ask another manager to set me up on training videos. When I asked the other manager, I got yelled at because she didn't have time for me. Story 61, walked in as a web developer and sat down expecting to get things set up. Our BlackBerry server isn't working, and neither is our intranet site. Can you take a look? Ended up walking the network guy through moving the website to a different server because something in the IaaS config is broken. It was day 2 before I finally got my own network sign-on. Story 62. Worked in a Cherry warehouse one summer, and on my first day, they moved me to the line to try and help fix the traffic jam of boxes that were piling up. The boxes were all pushing up against each other and crushing the cherries inside before they could be stacked onto the pallets in the freezer. They gave me directions in broken and barely understandable English and yelled at me in Spanish when their directions they gave me didn't help the issue. Finally, the supervisor yelled, "You are killing me," and moved me off that part of the line. I had followed all her sets of directions exactly as she described them to me. She had nobody else to blame for her inability to solve the problem, so she decided to yell at whoever was physically closest to her. Very frustrating place to work. Story 63. My very first job was working for a grocery store as a bag boy and cart gopher. The very first day, they rushed me through the onboarding process because they wanted me to hurry up and get to work. Why? It was hailing outside and no one wanted to get carts, so they figured they'd let the 16-year-old new hire do it. Spent the entire night outside in the hail getting carts. Worked there for a month and quit. That store was ran by incompetent a-holes and closed a few years later. Story 64. For context, I was a full-time university student at the time. The first day is on a 3-month summer contract in my area of study, with the potential to extend into part-time hours during the academic year, so I felt the pressure to make a good impression. Day 1, supervisor is 1.5 hours late. Doesn't text/email phone. Big boss walks in at 9:30 asking if I've finished the project that, during the interview, I expressed needing specific training to accomplish and never ended up getting, and was supposed to take all summer to complete. He goes on to say that he's paying me so much money. No, he wasn't. The position was funded by the government and the school, and it was $6 OIHR below market rate. That he expects me to earn it. The asks just got more outrageous after that. Story 65. Just happened 1/2 of HR ago. Interview was set up. I am a BA of nerves, studying everything about the company. On the road early. See a street vendor selling tamales. Pull over, buy tamales for later, and a champurrado for now. Get there, park, drink my champurrado. Go and talk, and was about to get tour when drink kicked in. Rushed to nearest toilet. Almost didn't make it. I destroyed that toilet, made some terrible noises. I'm certain everyone in that office heard them. Came out, interviewer asked if it'd be better to postpone tour. I agreed. Went home with 0 chance of getting hired. Just got called. I start tomorrow. Champurrado is a warm, thick, wheat-sweet breakfast drink. Story 66. I know we are talking first day at work, however, this happened to someone I work with who has been working here for over 15 years. I got a phone call on a Sunday that we had a power trip and the whole plant was down. When I was doing the investigation, it turned out the shift supervisor was doing his weekend round and saw a button that said test. He hadn't pushed the button in 15 years, but on this day he decided to push it. His words were, "The damn thing said test. What was I supposed to do?" The button dropped the main breaker for the substation coming into the plant. I still give him crap about pushing random buttons. We had the button removed. Operators had a fluorescent label made that said, "Guy, don't push this button." Story 67. My first day working at a new hospital, I was getting a tour near the ER when a psych patient jumped out of the bathroom as I was walking by, slapped me hard across the face, and yelled the N-word at me before running out the exit in her gowns. Yes, I still work here. Story 68. Two friends and I decided to move from Fargo to Denver. I got a job offer to manage a bank out there, so I ended up moving a week before my friend. Loaded up my car with all my stuff, drove to Denver on a Friday, and got my room set up that weekend. Sunday night, I'm exhausted and decide to take a bath and relax before I started my new job the next day. I fill up the tub and grab my book of the ledge behind me, completely forgetting I'd set my phone on top. My phone fell into the bath and instantly died. So I was in a city I didn't know, starting a brand new job, and didn't have my alarm clock, navigation way to call them if I was going to be late. But sure, 'twas a blast. Story 69. I quit the next day. The team took me to lunch and was like, spewing slurs. I was like, wait, what? No! I seriously thought it was like a HR diversity inclusion test or something. Nope. This big company in Columbus, Ohio called Check Free was full of gits. The HR department walked me into a conference room the following morning and said, "We acknowledge you feel differently and we'll try not to say these things around you anymore." Dafuk? Way wrong answer. I walked, totally jobless. I didn't care. I want no part of that. Story 70. It was actually day 5. I'm the only woman, important to know. The week went great and I was so excited to start my new career. Then, at the end of the day, our instructor starts talking about jobs that took him out of state, specifically Vegas. He starts talking about escorts and telling us funny stories about them. It was, for the most part, okay. I mean, not my cup of tea, but whatever. So he keeps talking. Finally, about 5 minutes left and he's like, "Y'all want to hear a joke?" We say yes. Mother Ducker tells a ducking abuse joke. If I had any respect for the guy, it went right out the window. Luckily, I only have to deal with him every few months when I go to school, trade job. Story 71. Back in 2011, got a construction job as a roofer. $10 an hour, cash, and the biggest rule was you are fired the second you hit the ground. Meaning, if you fall off the roof, you never worked for me. 10 a.m., the boss is drunk and backs his truck up into a wall on a client's property. Stupid me stuck around for like 2 years. Story 72. When I was a teenager, I got a job as a survey taker at the mall. You stand around and try to convince the shoppers to take a survey. I had never had so many people be hateful and ugly to me in my life. Some screamed and cursed at me. Some ignored me completely. Many were just very short and curt with me. Either way, nobody at all was kind or polite about it. I hated that job and left on my second day. When I come across one in the mall, I'm at least polite. I understand why nobody wants to do them, but there's no need to be so ugly about it. Story 73. It was my first job out of college. The company owner came to the school for an open house, and the plant manager called the next day to set up an interview. I nailed the interview and went on my way. The day I was supposed to start, I realized no one told what time we start, and I showed up 3 hours late. I ended up staying at that job for almost 5 years and loved the people I worked with. I do hope they're all doing okay. Story 74. Started in a new kitchen in UK, Weatherspoon, so I arrived at 6 a.m. I'm completely alone. I turned on everything and was trying to get things running. I've been asked to do breakfast while having zero experience at that place. Fair enough, until I get slammed with 15 tables and spent quite a while to find pancakes mixture or something to make pancakes with, only to realize there are pancakes ready, frozen, and basically almost entire menu is microwave. My coworker arrived 4 hours late, who meant to train me. Didn't even get recognized. Nobody thanked me, nothing. Left the job quite shortly after, especially when another chef mistaken 2 of my steaks well done and medium rare. I've raised my hands and gave up at that point. Story 75. I got a temp job at an office going through files and shredding old documents. What they didn't tell me until I got there was that the shredder was actually a leaf shredder located on a loading dock. So in my nice first day at work clothes, I loaded a handcart with paper boxes, trekked through the hot Texas sun in August to this unair-conditioned loading dock, and fed paper into this leaf shredder, back and forth several times. Story 76. On my first day, They didn't provide any training or health and safety, got angry at me for not bringing my laptop with me, which they never told me to do, and considered making me go home to get it, which would have taken 2 hours. So they changed my job role to a lower position, doing cold emailing, and made me start working without filling in any forms, including bank details to pay me. Oh, and I also had to write my own contract. During my lunch break, I left and sent them an email saying I was quitting and blocked them from contacting me. Story 77, software job in the 90s. I show up just before 9 a.m. No one in the department I was working for was there until almost 10 a.m. after I awkwardly waited in the lobby beside reception for about an hour. Then my manager realized that they forgot that I was starting that week. I'm standing around half the day, no desk or chair assigned to me, no computer to set me up with. They didn't really know what to do with me. They handed me some obsolete documentation to read and then basically sent me home as there was no work for me to do. I eventually got a desk and computer a few days later, and it really worked out well with that company. Was there for several years. Story 78. Uncle got me a job working at his friend's warehouse, where they made dresses. I walk in there with zero experience whatsoever, and the owner says to me, "So your uncle told me that you're really smart. I'm looking for someone to take over my business." I did not go back a second day. Story 79. I took a temp job from an agency while I was looking for a permanent position. I showed up and was told they forgot to cancel the request for a temp, but let me work for the day anyway. They had me go through resumes for the people they were going to permanently hire into the position I was there for. Icing on the cake was that I had bought new shoes the day before and made an ass of myself several times, tripping in front of everyone in the office. They probably wouldn't have kept me anyway. Story 80. At a very traditional European restaurant in a major Canadian city. In there 4 hours, I saw chicken being left outside the fridge to thaw from. Overnight, the kitchen caught fire because no one had cleaned their grease trap in 6 months. They continued serving people. It was an open kitchen. People were being served food while they could see a grease fire. Story 81. First day at my first full-time job ever, working as an assistant to an attorney. I didn't have a key yet, so I had to wait for another employee to come up and let me in. Said coworker who did arrive asked if it was my first day, and I said, "Yeah, I'm our assistant attorney Paul's new assistant." He laughed, shook his head, then opened the door for me as he said, "Good luck." 3 more employees told me they were either rooting for me or wishing me the best working with this attorney. I lasted 2 months, which apparently was quite a record around there. Story 82. My first day at Lowe's as a supervisor. I was plopped in front of a computer for 4 hours. Then after my lunch break, I was told to go dig out snow and ice for the rest of my shift because we had to build a wheelbarrow display. It did not get better. That was by far the worst job I've ever had. Story 83. First day cooking at a restaurant. Busy dinner rush. 4 people on the hotline, including the general manager. I go to put a plate of food up in the window and cold cock the GM in the temple with the dew of the plate because he chose that exact moment to reach for something in front of me. Pow. Out cold. As the EMT strapped him on the gurney to take him to the ear, I asked him if I still have a job. I did, but every time I asked for a raise or a special day off, he reminded me that I gave him a concussion on day 1. Story 84. Not my story, but my friend's. He had just got this job at McDonald's, and on his first day, these 2 co-workers start fighting, and while they were fighting, they somehow cornered him. So he was just stuck right there. One time, this lady came in about 30 minutes before they closed, and the person working the register turned around to her manager and deadass said, "Can I call her a Karen?" Then the manager nodded. The employee said, "We're closed, Karen," to the costumer. I've been to this McDonald's before, and if you don't tell them exactly what you want, you won't get it. Story 85. I got a job at Arby's in a very busy town. They threw me on the register alone on my first day. I was already super overwhelmed when I gave food to a customer and said, "Careful, the fries are hot." He immediately put one in his mouth and screamed at me because I guess they weren't actually hot. I walked out and didn't return. Story 86. The job was to go around to restaurants and deep clean them, which means traveling through Montana, Idaho, and Washington. Drove 8 hours to Idaho. Cleaned for 9 hours. Drove back. Half an hour before we got to the shop, the driver lost control of the van, hit the guardrail, which was by a creek, thank God we didn't go in, then hit the center median. Me and driver were fine. The guy in the back broke his foot, also had caustic chemical on his back since it wasn't tied down. Needless to say, I quit when I got home. Story 87. My grandmother had just died, and I went into the store in tears thinking they were just going to fire me for asking to start a week later. They instead were super understanding and helpful and told me to simply call when I was ready to start working. Story 88. Not me, but a coworker. I was working at a restaurant as a cook. Kid came in for his first day and thought he was locked in the freezer. Nobody noticed that he was gone, so he started to call the restaurant phone, and that's how we found out. Story 89. I had to sit for 90 minutes with nothing to do in my IT help desk role because the only person who could assign me login credentials always arrived later than the others. When he eventually came to my desk, tiny workshop, and said, "Fire her up," I panicked. There was no point me switching on my PC at all, but I became embarrassed that I hadn't even looked at it. I didn't want to hesitate while seeking out exactly where the on-off switch was, so gambled on the first one I saw, and ejected the casing with a loud twang that everyone heard. Story 90. Oh, my first day. They told me any PTO hours that I take must be made up within the quarter. Got it, so I don't actually get PTO. I started looking for a new job the next day. Story 91. My first job, first day, was at a very popular pizza shop hangout. I was getting changed into my regular clothes after my shift. My name tag fell off my shirt, name side up onto an overflowing toilet straight out of Train Spotting. Panicking, I started flushing only to make things worse. I ran out the door hoping for the best and didn't hear a thing. I reluctantly showed up for my next shift to be pulled aside by my manager and a delivery driver to, as if things were okay. Worked there for another 2 years. Story 92, first day at a Weatherspoons in the kitchen. For some reason, they decided to make my first shift dinner time on a Friday, so of course, the whole place was rammed as this was in the middle of the city. I was trained with help from a girl for about an hour, but then her shift ended and I was on my own. So I was in charge on my own station during the busiest shift and had no idea what I was doing. So I just said, "Duck this," and walked out without telling anyone. Oh, story 93. Not my first day. We were putting metal roofs on new turkey barns, surrounded by older full of turkey barns. The new guy came in all bluster and hammer at the ready. He got on the roof. It was very hot at 8 a.m. and going to get hotter. He got several flies, there were millions, up his nose and into his mouth, gagged, puked, almost fell off the roof, got his stuff and into his car, and we never saw him again. It was 8:15. Story 94. Motel 6 in a semi-shady area. The general manager of the region trained me with probably the sloppiest paperwork available, told me I had to work a combo of morning swing and overnight shifts in the same week, sometime back-to-back or with an 8-hour break, and spent most of the time talking about how much of a joke it was to work there. Decided maybe that wasn't for me and just didn't go back. If the GM hates the job, it'll probably suck hard for me on the ground level. Story 95. Started at a large cola company, yay that one, in a plant facility. Within 1 week, I had an acid burn on my foot the size of a nickel and had some caustic agent splattered in my eyeballs. It was my first and only week. Still one of the few jobs I just stopped going into without any notice. Story 96. Caregiver showed up to a home and the client wasn't told I was coming. Exact same thing happened next day, only I scared the crap out of some poor old lady. A couple weeks later, I get an email saying, wages are going up for the whole company, and mine will be 16.25. First check-based pay was $1,500. I sent an email asking why. I got a voicemail saying the letter went to the wrong person, so the letter was incorrect, not the paycheck. I quit right then. Story 97. I was selected to interview in a small, independently owned sandwich shop in a ritzy area. The place got slammed during lunch. They scheduled my interview for 11 a.m. After waiting around for 20 minutes for a manager to come interview me, they handed me an apron and said, "We need you back there to test your skills." I was there for 3 hours and assembling sandwiches. At the end, I received no pay, no interview, no job, not even a sandwich. Story 98. I'm a clinical social worker. During my previous job, I was a regular social worker. First day on the new job, I was shadowing a colleague to help me get acclimated to the job. We got call about a client who I was in distress. We head over to the house where he was. He was standing in the driveway. Out of nowhere, the gets a box cutter and proceeds to mutilate his genitalia. Worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Story 99, I-26F, got a summer job working for a family friend's pool company the summer of my freshman year of college. My first day was when the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage, and I found out all my coworkers were holes. I had only recently come out to my family and friends, and this was not a fun place to work, obviously. What was your most intense first day on the job experience? Story 1, my first job. I was 15 and desperate to find a place that would hire younger than 16. I'm walking around my local strip mall and I see this hole in the wall, Chinese takeout with a help wanted sign. It's about 4 MME. I walked in and was greeted by a 410 version of the landlady from King Fu Hustle with an American replacement name like Becky. No real name. She pulls out the carbon ticket and says, "Help you? What you like?" It says help wanted on your window. Huh? I'm looking for work. You want work? Yes, please. Okay. She waved me to the counter as I was near the now closed door. You pick up phone, say Chinese takeout, I help you? Then write order on ticket, okay? Large or small, no medium, okay? Okay, now the calculator. Add up older and taxes like this, 8.1%. Okay, Tickets go here? Both. Delivery is 40-minute, okay? And she went back to the kitchen. I winged it on the phones for an hour, only 2 orders, until another employee showed up. Mormon girl named, let's say, Catherine. She spends the rest of the night teaching me more about what to do and the ticket shorthand the kitchen staff can read. Great girl, super grateful for her. Couple other employees show up a little later, 2 delivery drivers and another counter girl. Around 8 p.m., my ma calls me saying, "Where the duck are you?" I'm at work, I think. She said I'll be done by 9. It's a Chinese takeout on street. 9 rolls around and she asks what I want to eat. I tell her I'm broke. Turns out each employee gets a pint of half whatever, as long as it's not expensive, half rice. I get some orange chicken and she says, "Come back tomorrow, 5 o'clock, okay?" Best job I ever had. Love those people. Story 2. I was overlooking a job site where a very expensive rock saw was cutting a 20-foot deep trench initially in what should have been, as surveyed, a solid limestone bed. My new boss at the environmental consulting firm let me know there was nothing that could possibly happen, that I needed to be there for the initial cut, and that it would be the easiest day of work I'd ever had. Boss leaves for a different work site. A couple hours later, the saw begins its first cut and it breaks through an ancient clay sewer line that was directly underneath the giant saw machine. The machine sinks about 7 feet into the ground. Best part, the operator gets out of the saw, walks over to me, the site manager, and the other official individual and says, "It was like that when I got here," gets in his truck, and we never saw him again. Story 3. First rotation through the ER as an imaging student, there's a code call. I had no idea what was going on. My tech teacher looks at me and says, "You had to pass CPR to get in here, right?" I just look at him blankly and say, yeah? He responds, "Good, you then me." Next thing I know, I'm in Ear 1 trauma room with about 20 other people doing CPR on a woman as the doc does his best. 2 people before me, the doc calls time of death. My tech and I go back to our little x-ray room and just go on like someone didn't just die in front of me on my first rotation. Story 4. Being taken out to lunch by a manager and having to listen to him talk about his miserable marriage. Then, of course, he hit on me and tried to hold my hand. Story 5. First day, working in a mental hospital. We had a patient elope and had to chase him. He jumped over a barbed wire fence. I figured if he could do it, then so could I. I couldn't. I got caught, my pants ripped, cuts on my hands, legs, and abdomen. Then once I got over, I lost a shoe in the creek bed. I met my shift supervisor wearing jeans turned into chaps and bleeding everywhere. They had me go home to change. Since I had just got a new car and I didn't want to get it dirty, I stripped down. I scared the crap out of my family, showing up 5 hours early, naked, covered in blood and mud. Story 6. Got a job at Sony first day. Flew to Tokyo before I left. I went to a map store and got a Tokyo street map book. At the time, I believed it was a crafty book, because none of the streets had names. I volunteered to be navigator for our group, using the map book. I managed to find most of the places we needed to go, but it was hard. We were standing on the street. I was looking at the map book, trying to make sense of it. A Japanese dude came up and said, "I'm learning English. Can I speak English to you? Would you like to hear the inaugural address of John Fitzgerald Kennedy?" He then proceeded to recite it with a Boston accent. Methinks he memorized the sounds of the words from a recording. He then asked, "Would you like to hear the inaugural address of Ronald Wilson Reagan?" I said no, we just need help finding a place. He then proceeded to tell us his master plan. He wanted to learn English, move to the USA, become a lawyer, get elected to Congress, change the Constitution to allow foreigners to be elected president and be elected president. I responded, "You should know that 2 kinds of people that many Americans hate are lawyers and politicians." He gave us directions to our destination and we thanked him later. I learned that the map book I used was the official map book of Tokyo, used by cab drivers. I also learned that Japanese streets don't have names. Story 7. Okay, so I know this is your first day at a fast food restaurant, but I got to get back to the register. Hope you know how to use a deep fryer. Toodles. Duck you, Galvin. I may be the best man in your wedding, but still duck you. Story 8. I was hired on as an operations manager in a factory. I was in charge of about 40 people. The job required lots of walking, up and down graded stairs. It was a loud and dusty work environment, and almost everyone there did nothing but jack off when management wasn't around. Now for the interesting part. On my first real day, one of my employees got their hand caught in one of the grinders and lost the tips of his fingers. There was blood everywhere, and he was screaming. I immediately saw what was going on and ran towards him. I slipped on a banana peel and fell on my back. I'm 6'4", so as you can imagine, it was a hard fall. I got up immediately and took care of my worker until the ambulance arrived. That was all before 9 o'clock. Story 9, not first day, but this was within the first week working at a gas station. I was brand new and stocking some things in the store, and my coworker, who was kind of still new, was operating the tills. The manager went to go to the washroom. This typical lady with the "I want a manager" haircut walks in and says, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but there's a truck on fire in your parking lot. And wouldn't you know it, crap was on fire. I bent the bracket trying to yank the fire extinguisher off the wall and eventually put the guy's truck out. 5 minutes later, the manager exits the washroom to a busted wall mount, a missing employee, and a pickup truck covered in white powder. Story 10. I was 17, first day on the job at PetSmart. It was hot as hell outside. My boss ran in the door carrying a limp Australian Shepherd. He screamed at me to go get ice from one of the nearby restaurants. Some a hole had left the pup in their car to go grocery shopping. My boss disappeared into the Banfield at the back of the store, and throughout the day I kept an ear out to hear if the dog would be okay. At the end of my shift, he finally came out, tears still running down his face and fuming mad. The dog did not make it. I spent the rest of my shift trying to hold it together, but eventually ended up quitting. I wasn't sure if that would become a daily occurrence and didn't think I could handle it. Story 11. First day on the job. We had a dog come in that had completely hit herself. She had had a foreign body removal surgery. She ate something she couldn't poop out the week before, and her owner didn't follow the very explicit and serious discharge instructions about her keeping her e-collar on 24/7. She was allowed to have it off at home and tore open her stitches. First surgery cost them $6K plus. Second surgery cost them at least $10K plus. Story 12. My boss changed my start date and time without telling me, so I showed up a day and a half early. This was after orientation, so we had already met at this point. He said it was fine, so I started then, but he didn't actually have any time set aside to train me, so I just kind of shadowed him for the day. First interaction with an employee, I was middle management. He made her cry by berating her. Turned out a lunch shift person called out, hotel restaurant, and he wanted an opener to cover it. Only it was her birthday, and she was having lunch with her parents who were driving 3+ hours to see her. She was also 18 and still in school. So he literally yelled at her about how little she cares about her career and how she's wasting everyone's time. I didn't last 3 months there. Their annual employee turnover was 97%. I laughed when they told me because I thought they were kidding. Other than upper management, I only knew one person who had worked there longer than 1 year. Story 13. My first night working security during Fantasy Fest in Key West, I had to break up 3 blowjobs, 4 finger-banging sessions, tell 80-some-odd people to stay off their phones, tell 8 different dudes they couldn't have an erection, throw out a dude for pissing off the balcony, throw out another dude for pissing in the planter, broke up 2 fights, confiscated 3 bags of mystery powder, 2 bags of pills, and escorted dozens of drunk people down many stairs. Story 14. Not as intense as some, but when at university, I worked doing outreach with underprivileged children. We had our training the day and I was all excited. My group were cool, but very streetwise. Come lunch and think back to the training. Sit with them and talk about what they want to talk, but if possible, try and have a conversation about their dream jobs. I asked the quietest kid in the group, and the kid next to him said, he won't have a job. He'll probably just lie on his couch all day and smoke. At no point in the training did it cover what to do, so flustered, I gave an embarrassed half laugh and changed the subject. Unfortunately, the kid then spent the rest of the day saying he'll do substances. It was only later on that I realized how sad it was that this kid obviously had personal experience with someone who does just that. I did report it to my boss, and annoyingly soon worked out how I should have handled it, but it was an eye-opener for me. Story 15. I was 16 and had my first day of my first job at Kroger during the Super Bowl. It was an 8-hour shift as a bagger cart runner, and to this day, I think it will be difficult to top how exhausted I was after that day. Story 16. Show up on a new house build that's in foundation stages and need to make room for machinery to come in and work. Contractor kid says, let's cut all these trees marked with red X. On a normal size plot, I count 22 small to medium pine trees. Contractor says each one needs to be dropped today, can cut and move tomorrow. Most of the trees are around the perimeter of the property, which has a chain link fence around it as per code. Contractor is very worried about ruining this fence as it is rented. He says there is not enough time to move fence. We need to cut the trees today and not damage the fence. Guy says he can't ruin another rental fence. Really starts stressing it. Okay, guy, that sure is a lot, but I can help her. Where's your saw? Here she is. Brings a steel out, but the chain is barely on it. I notice it's very dull. Has full gas mix, but no bar oil. He proceeds to fling the saw wildly, trying to start it by holding the throttle wide open with one hand and ripping the started with the other. No third contact point. Let me help her. I tighten chain, ask him for bar oil, and do a rough chain sharpening, which frustrates him. He comes back with 5-to-W30, says it will work. No buddy. The grief and regret to responding to a Craigslist gig is setting in. He keeps saying, let's go. Start cutting. I do my SF up, get to work. I am reading my fourth tree when he comes over and stops me. Why are you making so many cuts? Just push it through. I explain to him my wedge cut and back cut controls the fall. Watch this. Starts cutting at the ground, gets saw stuck almost immediately. I take saw back and try to keep going, but the fence, he murdered. He then insists on helping by pulling the tree towards where he wants it to go. This guy's gut is less than 20 inches from my chain as I cutty a shirt like this is completely normal. What the hell are you doing, dude? We gotta get this done, man. I got other projects to tend to. You are doing it my way or you can leave with nothing. I am stressed to the max. I should have duck and quit like 5 times by now, but I was very broke. He says working together in the tree pulling will make this faster and protect his fence. Says he will pay me more because I seem to know what I'm doing. So every tree that's close to the fence, he puts himself right next to my saw. His cotton t-shirt dangling by my saw blade, his ungloved hands straining for grip as he pulls at the bark, Timberlands slipping in the mud and squinting for safety from the chips as I run a chainsaw into my tree. He would do this as the first 1/2 of the cut was made all the way through the fall, dodging each tree by clamoring to his precious rental fence. I hated it. I hated him for being so stupid. I hated myself for doing the job. The only thing other than money that kept me there was that I was experienced. I had brought my chaps and helmet with me, supplied my own bar oil, and knew what I was doing. I'd been cutting full-time that summer and was just in need of some weekend cash. It wasn't even great money. I'm just glad I didn't hit him. Years later, it haunts me. Think if he had slipped and his stomach met the chainsaw, or if an unexpected foreign object lodged in a tree caused the saw to kick back at his dumb face. What haunts me as much was that at the end of this horrible day after I had received my payment, he said there was another lot that I could help him cut tomorrow. I lost it. No, you stupid, inexperienced, underappreciating, idiotic, miraculously lucky jackass dumb crap. I am not working with you ever again. He will just hire the next guy then. Someone will do it for cheaper. He guarantees it. Stupid kid. He was the flashy one, selling jobs to home builders, who drove a fancy car and talked so much about how things could be done faster. Sometimes I wonder how that following Sunday went for him. Has he learned a lesson from his boss by now, or was it by the blade? Why did he trust me when B never even interviewed me? I still tense up when I think about that day. I learned that I will never do something that stupid again, and how money isn't worth potentially gutting some guy I just met. Story 17. I tell you, the first day being a tattoo artist and tattooing an actual client, not a friend or family member, but a complete stranger who came in off the street is enough to pucker your butthole. I mean, they start you with simple stuff, like lettering or infinity symbols. But conversely, the simpler the tattoo is, the worse it is if you duck up, since there's nowhere to hide a happy accident. The first few months can be stressful, but as you settle in and learn to trust your skills, it becomes a job like any other. We did have one apprentice at our shop that couldn't handle the stress of working on actual clients, though she had other issues going on at the time too, and she quit shortly after getting her license. Story 18. A few years ago, I got hired as a new teacher at a rough school district 3 days before school started. It was my first year teaching, so I had absolutely no resources, and this class didn't have a curriculum or any other teachers that were teaching it. It was 5 sections of 9th grade general science, which are all kids that had failed 8th grade science. I had no freaking clue what I was doing. The first day itself went relatively fine, but getting thrown into it with zero preparation was scary as hell. Sadly, the year got much worse after that first day, and I'm amazed that I made it through the whole year after how horrible it was. Story 19. Okay, I have one for this. So it was 2006 or 2007, and I was working summer stock as a master electrician in Allentown, PA. The run ended on Thursday night. I drove home on Friday morning. Friday afternoon, I was offered a job in Maine for a 3-month run of a show. They wanted me Monday morning. I hadn't even washed clothes yet, so I asked if I could start Tuesday. After some back and forth, they relented, and Tuesday worked. So Tuesday at 6 a.m., I left South Jersey to drive to Maine for a 7:30 performance. I arrived at around 4, dropped my gear and personal stuff in the apartment provided, and walked to the theater. After signing some contracts and talking to the stage manager, I find out that Mel Ducking Brooks is in the audience that night. See, what had happened was Friday morning, the master electrician and the board op for the show quit. When they called me, I had no clue of any of this. Anyway, apparently Mel Brooks likes to scout out any theaters that are going to run tweaked or rewritten versions of any of his musicals, and this theater was a possibility. Friday morning, the director and technical director realized they didn't have anyone experienced for what was basically the biggest performance of their career. That's why they relented and accepted a Tuesday arrival. If they had been straight with me, I would have shown up Monday with bells on. During the meeting with the stage manager and director, I reassure everyone, as long as the stage manager calls a good show and tells me when to hit cues, we will be fine. Any issues that arise during the performance, technical or electrical I can cover. Director is happy and goes to meet with the cast to calm them down. They all knew who was in the audience. Stage manager blankly looks at me and tells me, "This show has been running so long, and the last guy wrote all the cues that I haven't had to call the show for over a month." My simple response is, "Well, we are ducked." After some back and forth, I asked to have a copy of his prompt book. Good stage managers always have a spare if something happens to the first, and I will call my own cues and run it by feel. So, about 15 minutes before doors open, I'm running through about 200 lighting cues, trying to take a mental snapshot of each and praying to whomever would listen to get us through the night. 3 hours or so later, curtain came down and the show from a lighting standpoint was passable. My timing was close enough that unless you knew what you were looking at, you wouldn't notice. After a cig and a deep breath, I was asked if I wanted to meet Mel Brooks. First thing he says to me after I introduce myself is, "I hear it's your first day here." I started laughing immediately and relayed the story to him much quicker than this novel. He laughed, then asked me my favorite movie of his, and was pleased when I said Robin Hood Men in Tights, just because it's not the standard answer. First day with a new theater company, and Mel Brooks was in the audience. No one knew the show, so I had to fly by the seat of my pants and mostly succeeded. Story 20. I worked on a hotline for a year. My shift was a weekday afternoon, so supposedly it wasn't too busy. My first shift came immediately after finishing the mandatory training period. I had 4 calls in a 2-hour period, one of which needed emergency intervention. I think my heart raced through the rest of the night. Story 21. Took mortars within an hour of landing in Afghanistan on my first deployment on a base that hadn't been attacked in 3 months. I might be bad luck. Story 22. Filled out new hire paperwork for a job as an installation technician and was told to come back the next day for training. Turns out, training was working a 12-hour shift while shadowing the area manager on his route. That ended up being one of the best and worst jobs I ever had. Story 23. I guess Navy boot camp counts. I didn't sleep for the first 24 hours, and they told me I couldn't wear my contacts, and I didn't bring a backup pair of glasses, so I was walking around basically blind. Story 24. My first day as a brand new nurse, 75% of the patients on our floor were actively dying. I had to take 5 deceased patients down to the morgue. To this day, it is still the most emotionally taxing day I've ever had at work. Everyone was honestly shocked I came back the next day. Story 25. First week working as a graduate assistant with my university, I discovered and prevented a death attempt. Any graduate student could work for university admissions, but I was still surprised they picked me, a master's student in the clinical counseling department. A lot of men and women applied for the position, and in the end, only 3 were selected. Needless to say, I was ambitious and overzealous during my first week. Every first-year freshman survey submitted, I pored over. Rather than just entering in the numbers, I paid close attention to the responses. There were hundreds of these papers, maybe even close to 1,000. That's when I read one survey that just didn't sit right with me. She spoke in a pessimistic way, only of the past and present, almost as if there were no future plans for herself. Keep in mind, this was an entry survey seeing what goals or aspirations they had for the upcoming year. It seemed wrong. I notified my supervisor, who I had only known a few days, and he allowed me to contact her to meet one-on-one. What I thought might be a 10-minute meeting with the student turned into 5 hours. Turns out she had been planning on hit herself that semester. I stayed with her in the office until her parents were able to drive over from the next state. She dropped out and got the help she needed. A year passed, and the department kept me on as a grad assistant again. I found myself going through the same student surveys when I got a knock on my office door, and there she was, ready to be a freshman again. I pretty much ugly cried as professionally as I could, and it further cemented my desire to be in the field of mental health. Story 26. My first shift as a bartender. I was out of town before I started and told them as much. They still scheduled me for training during that week, so when I got back, my first training shift was actually in place of my first real shift. It shouldn't be too busy tonight, they said. It was supposed to be 3 bartenders and me as a trainee, but the others called out, so it was just me and my trainer, and we got slammed. It was so bad. And I didn't even get tipped out for it because I was training Story 27. First day working as a chef de partie at a restaurant, had almost no training. I was to come on and learn at first. First day on the job, the sous chef and assistant sous got trapped in their driveways by a bunch of downed trees. Big storm. So the only people working the line were me and the head chef. Yay. We had a veteran waiter do desserts, pastry, so we didn't have to worry about it. I managed fry, grill, and the griddle all by myself. Head chef took sauté, salads, and fish stations. Oh, did I mention it was also Memorial Day weekend? So we were booked. I didn't have a single sendback or complaint, but man, I was dead tired by the end. Head chef bought me a 12-pack of nice beer and a bottle of whiskey as a present the next shift. Easily one of my favorite days on the job, though. Story 28. I was a temp at a property management company. Turned out that actually meant handle the front desk immediately after a major fire caused by one tenant's gross negligence, and handle hordes of people super pissed off when their home is destroyed, uninhabitable, or just blocked off because it turns out asbestos remediation is a thing after the building has been on fire. Story 29. I babysat all the time in high school. Your first day with a new family can be a little tricky because kids know the babysitter has no real authority over them, and you have to develop a good rapport immediately if you want any hope of getting the kids to bed somewhat on time, at least in my town. But my little sister is 6 years younger than me, and all my previous jobs were watching her classmates and their siblings. So I had the advantage of already knowing the kids and hadn't dealt with anything too difficult. Then a couple from church hired me. They knew me from crib room, place where your infant toddler can hang out and be supervised while you listen to the sermon. And their daughter liked me because I build amazing block towers. But I'd only interacted with the girl for an hour on Sundays in a room filled with other children. I didn't have the same rapport with her as I did with my sister's classmates. And I didn't know her older sister, Jenny, at all. I was going in blind. I show up, the girls seem pretty amicable. They like that I'll go right into imaginary games with them. Aren't freaked out that mom and dad won't be home for a few hours. It looks like everything's gonna go smoothly. The parents start to leave. Just before he shuts the door, the dad says, "Oh, just to let you know, Jenny doesn't like clothes." Latch clicks. I whirl around. Jenny's butt naked. Babysitting with your eyes shut is really difficult. Story 30. Or nursing student with an intra-op code. Blueget hit himself in the armpit on purpose. Blew out all the arteries and airways. We tried to save him anyway. He got rolled in screaming, "I don't want to die." He did. It was a beautiful April day and he was 22. We openly massaged his heart to try to keep it beating. The surgeon called it at 1:10 in the afternoon. Story 31. My first day of hospital clinicals in nursing school was pretty intense. It was a pretty easy start to the day. I got assigned a Cop D patient in his early 80s. And he wasn't supposed to have much going on that day besides a CT scan. After going through his chart and doing an initial assessment, I helped take him down to seat. The machine required him to lay flat on his back, which is harder on patients in late stages of COPD than sitting up, with his arms raised. He was hooked up to oxygen the whole time, so the tech assumed he'd be okay, but once we left and got back to our floor, we both simultaneously noticed the guy was gasping for air, and his lips were turning blue. We hurried him back to the room, call a code, and watch as this guy goes into respiratory arrest. He was just a tech and I was just a student, so we really hadn't been trained for this. Help arrives, and my patient's actual nurse is nowhere to be found, so nobody in the room besides me knows anything about this guy. So I had to fill the doctor leading the emergency response in on all of this guy's information and the situation, which was terrifying. And all during this, my clinical instructor kept walking by the room making weird, goofy faces at me. The guy lived, but wow, what a way to start clinicals. First day of clinicals as a nursing student. Patient goes into respiratory arrest. Almost dies. I had to basically act as the actual nurse in conveying information because my patient's actual nurse was missing. Nursing teacher made goofy faces at me the whole time. I tried not to burst out laughing next to possibly dying man. Great time. Story 32. My manager sent me to a Kmart that was going to shut down for my first day just as security guard training. This was about a 3-hour bus ride from where I was staying, but I didn't mind since it was only for one day. Little did I know that my boss had just sent me all the way over there to cover another person's shift. It was a really stressful day since I had no idea what I was actually supposed to be doing. I was the only one stationed there, and I wasn't used to standing 8 straight. I did get free slushies though. Story 33. First day after my orientation night at my current job. The guy training me shows where I'm supposed to work, which machine, then walked off without showing me how to do my job. He did this for 2 weeks before other people noticed, and he got strung up by his balls, metaphorically. They gave me a new trainer, and a week later, I was doing well enough. They ended my training early. Normally it's 6 weeks. I had 3 weeks, and 2 of those were spent ducking crap up because I didn't know what to do. They already asked me about training other people because we have half the crew we are required to have by company policy, and I'm already better. After less than 2 months, started the 3rd week of July. Then many of the people who have 2 years at this job, it's not a hard job. These people just suck. Story 34. First night on the job as the watch commander for a security law enforcement group at an air station. I had been working there for about a year, but got promoted and it led to me running one of the shifts. I had another worker that was supposed to be my second in command. He had more experience than I did, but he was new, and it became apparent over time that he was a major slacker and didn't follow any rules very well. Let's call him Timmy. So about 1 a.m., Timmy decided he wanted to run a security drill. No big deal. Just got a brief dispatch and get a safety observer posted so that no one thinks it's a real event going down. He wants to just cross the red line of a restricted area on the flight line. He doesn't want to brief dispatch because he doesn't want them to announce we are going into a training environment. This always led to the guards being more alert, obviously, as they knew something was going down. He wanted to sneak in and plant a box by one of the planes, then announce the drill. I argued with him for a while, and finally he went back to his email or whatever he was doing. About 30 minutes later, one of the guards in the F-16 area pipes up on the radio. "Dispatch, this is I have an intruder in my area. He's carrying something and not stopping." I was in the office with another guy, and he gets this panicked look on his face and said, "Where the duck is Timmy?" The radio piped up again with, "Dispatch, and I'm taking the shot," immediately followed by, "It's me, it's Timmy. Don't shoot, don't shoot." Yeah, my first night as supervisor, and this bonehead almost got shot because he wanted to be sneaky. Story 35 was a correctional officer. Threw me right into an open, direct supervision pod full of about 64 inmates day one without even orientation. Had no prior experience beforehand. Was terrifying. Story 36. First day teaching. I was fresh out of college in the middle of a school year. December graduate. I was hired as a long-term substitute for a classroom that had seen 6 substitutes in as many months. I had zero experience as a teacher beyond teaching merit badges at Boy Scout camp. I was hired because I had the appropriate degree. I knew quite a few other teachers, and I was willing to try. I was given a laptop, a copy of the textbook, and roughly 3 weeks' worth of lesson plans. My first class would be an English 9 class. I went in the weekend before to get my classroom set up and make sure I was ready for my first day. I memorized the class roster and familiarized myself with everything I possibly could for the first day. Class started at 7:30 a.m., and half the class was absent. Great. I start doing the roll and get through the list when a young lady sitting on the side next to the windows asks if she can get up to go to the restroom. Could it wait 10 minutes? I know you need to go, but if you can wait 10 minutes, I'll give you a pass. Okay, but I need to go. 5 minutes later, she stands up, walks towards the door, and pukes on my laptop mid-stride. I've had the laptop for like maybe an hour at that point, and now it's covered in puke. We were barely 10 minutes into the first class period of my teaching career, and a 14-year-old girl who I only know a name for has just puked on my laptop. The rest of that year was a game of survival. Me versus about 90 adolescents. My liver may still be recovering.